Welcome to War Bios, the podcast that delves into the complexities of conflict and the art of warfare. I'm your host, General Biography, and today we're going to explore one of the most pivotal battles of the American Civil War, the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. This engagement, fought between June 27 and July 2, 1864, was a crucial moment in the Atlanta campaign, as Union forces under Major General William Tecumseh Sherman clashed with Confederate troops led by General John Bell Hood. As we set the stage for this epic struggle, let's journey back to the summer of 1864, when the war was raging across the continent. The Confederacy, reeling from defeats in the Western Theater, was desperate to defend its capital city, Atlanta. Meanwhile, Sherman's army, bolstered by victories in Tennessee and Kentucky, was pushing deep into Georgia, intent on capturing the city and crippling the Confederate war effort. The stage was set for a brutal and devastating engagement. The origins of the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain can be traced back to the spring of 1864, when Union forces began their advance into Georgia. On May 7, 1864, Sherman's army launched a series of attacks against the Confederate Army of Tennessee, led by General Joseph E. Johnston, at the Battle of Rocky Face Ridge. The Confederates held their ground, but Sherman's forces eventually outflanked them, forcing Johnston to retreat towards Atlanta. As the Union Army approached the outskirts of Atlanta, they encountered a series of fortified positions, including the defensive lines on Kennesaw Mountain. The mountain, located just northwest of Atlanta, offered a strategic vantage point for the Confederates, who had heavily entrenched themselves along its slopes. On June 10, 1864, Union forces under Major General George Thomas launched a reconnaissance in force against the Confederate lines on Kennesaw Mountain, probing for vulnerabilities in the enemy defenses. The Confederates, however, were well prepared and repelled the Union attack with heavy casualties. Undeterred, Sherman continued to probe the Confederate lines, searching for an opening to exploit. On June 14, 1864, Union forces launched a series of skirmishes against the Confederate positions on Kennesaw Mountain, but were again repelled. As the days passed, the tension between the two armies grew, each side waiting for the other to make a move. The air was thick with anticipation as soldiers on both sides prepared for the impending battle. On June 27, 1864, the Union Army launched a massive assault against the Confederate lines on Kennesaw Mountain, marking the beginning of one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War. With the armies arrayed against each other, the stage was set for a brutal and devastating engagement. The battle would be fought across multiple fronts, with soldiers on both sides facing unimaginable horrors and hardships. Welcome to the second segment of War Bios, where we're exploring the pivotal Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. As we delve into the primary events of this brutal engagement, let's revisit the summer of 1864, when the war was raging across the continent. The Confederacy, desperate to defend its capital city, Atlanta, had heavily entrenched itself along the slopes of Kennesaw Mountain, a strategic vantage point located just northwest of the city. On June 27, 1864, the Union Army, led by Major General William Tecumseh Sherman, launched a massive assault against the Confederate lines on Kennesaw Mountain. The battle was fought across multiple fronts, with soldiers on both sides facing unimaginable horrors and hardships. As Sherman's forces pushed forward, they encountered fierce resistance from the Confederates, who were determined to hold their ground. The Union Army's assault was led by Major General George Thomas's Army of the Cumberland, which consisted of over 60,000 troops. The Confederates, under the command of General John Bell Hood, had approximately 65,000 soldiers defending the mountain. As the battle raged on, both sides suffered heavy casualties, with the Union Army losing over 3,000 men and the Confederates losing around 2,500. One of the most significant events of the battle took place on June 27, when the Union Army's 14th Corps, led by Major General John M. Palmer, launched a frontal assault against the Confederate lines. The assault was repelled with heavy casualties, but it marked a turning point in the battle as Sherman began to shift his focus towards outflanking the Confederates. As the days passed, the tension between the two armies grew, each side waiting for the other to make a move. On June 28, 1864, Union forces launched a series of skirmishes against the Confederate positions on Kennesaw Mountain, probing for vulnerabilities in the enemy defenses. The Confederates, however, were well prepared and repelled the Union attack with heavy casualties. On July 1, 1864, Sherman's army launched another assault against the Confederate lines, this time focusing on the left flank of the mountain. The assault was led by Major General Joseph Hooker's XX Corps, which consisted of over 20,000 troops. Despite being outnumbered, the Confederates held their ground, and the Union army suffered significant losses. As the battle drew to a close, Sherman's army had failed to capture Kennesaw Mountain, but they had managed to outflank the Confederates and threaten their supply lines. On July 2, 1864, Hood's army retreated from the mountain, marking a significant turning point in the Atlanta campaign. In the words of Sherman himself, the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain was one of the bloodiest and most severe of the war. The enemy was strongly entrenched, and our men had to fight their way up the mountain, step by step. This quote encapsulates the brutality and intensity of the battle, which would be remembered for years to come as one of the most pivotal moments in the Civil War. As we reflect on the primary events of the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain, it's clear that this engagement was a crucial moment in the Atlanta campaign. The bravery and sacrifice of American soldiers on both sides will be forever etched in our collective memory. As we delve into the decline or aftermath of the battle, it's clear that the consequences of this brutal engagement had a lasting impact on the course of American history. The retreat of Hood's army from Kennesaw Mountain on July 2, 1864, marked a significant turning point in the Atlanta campaign. Sherman's army had failed to capture the mountain, but they had managed to outflank the Confederates and threaten their supply lines. As the Union army continued its push towards Atlanta, the city's defenses began to weaken. On July 17, 1864, Hood was replaced by General John Bell as the commander of the Confederate Army of Tennessee. However, this change in leadership did little to alter the course of the battle. On July 22, 1864, Sherman's army launched a series of attacks on the city, known as the Battle of Atlanta. The Confederates fought valiantly, but ultimately they were unable to hold back the Union army. On September 2, 1864, Atlanta fell to the Union army, marking a significant victory for Sherman and a crushing defeat for the Confederacy. The loss of Atlanta was a devastating blow to the Confederate war effort, as it had been a crucial supply hub and industrial center. In the aftermath of the battle, Kennesaw Mountain became a symbol of the brutality and intensity of the Civil War. The mountain slopes, once covered in lush green forests, were now scarred by the ravages of war. The site of the battle would eventually become a national battlefield park, serving as a reminder of the sacrifices made by American soldiers on both sides. As we reflect on the decline or aftermath of the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain, it's clear that this engagement was a crucial moment in the Atlanta campaign. The bravery and sacrifice of American soldiers on both sides will be forever etched in our collective memory. The battle marked a turning point in the war, as the Confederacy began to weaken and the Union Army gained momentum. In the years following the battle, Kennesaw Mountain would become a place of pilgrimage for veterans and civilians alike. The site would serve as a reminder of the horrors of war and the importance of preserving peace. Today, the Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park is one of the most visited national parks in the United States, attracting millions of visitors each year. The bravery and sacrifice of American soldiers on both sides will be forever remembered, and the legacy of the battle will continue to shape our understanding of the Civil War and its impact on our nation. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.